Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to build a little bit of a critter, a creature. Now, we've been making objects for the last couple of videos and everything. We've made rectangles. We've made some rectangles that you can actually visually see. Uh, Talked about how a couple of other things would be made, like a zombie or something like that. But this time, we're going to make something a little bit more complicated, and that's a critter here. Now, when I think of critters, I think of the old Tamagotchi pet type things from way back in the day. Uh, you could feed it, you can, play with it and make it train, and you have to clean it and do all sorts of different things to it. So that's kind of the idea of this, or at least the rough idea. Of course, I'm going to keep this as simple as I can, just because it'll be a little easier for us. So, our critter that I've already got written out here, you can see, is going to comprise of a couple of different things. I have to figure out what attributes describe this critter. So, what attributes describe this thing? Well, it's going to have a name, and I'm going to give it a hunger gauge that, will be like 0 to 100. 100 being full, 0 being, starving to death. I could also give it, a happiness gauge if I wanted to, so we could play with it and make it happier or something like that. There's several different statistics I could give it, but this should be enough to kind of get the point across, I think. And if you want to go ahead and play and add different things and features, you're more than welcome to. And of course, we need some functions. We need to be able to feed it. And I'll feed it, maybe 3 things, right? We're going to be able to talk to it. And what the talk's going to do is it's just going to say a different thing depending on how hungry it is. I could, of course, make like a list of random things, and it could just randomly say it depending on certain circumstances. But again, we're making this simple, so I'm just going to make it say something different depending on how hungry it is. So it'll basically just be checking hunger and say different messages based on that. We're going to make another function called hangry. Now, we're going to make like a loop that loops, and it's going to give us a choice whether we want to talk to the creator or feed it, or whatever. And every time we choose an option, the loop's going to run. It'll run that option, and then we'll go back to the beginning of the loop. Do we want to keep talking and playing with the critter? Do we want to quit? That sort of thing. But every time this loop runs, I'm going to subtract, a random amount from the hunger. That way, it's going to steadily go down as I do things to it. Now, if I wanted to add like a play function or something, well, then I could make it subtract every time I played. Since I don't have that, I'll just randomly subtract that amount every time it runs. And of course, you could, you want to train it or do other things, you can add those little statistics up here, and then, just adjust it as you want. But that should roughly give us an idea of what we want to do here. Now, I created a file called critter, and I'm opening up an older file. I did a new one earlier today, but it's the same. So I'm going to import random because I want my hunger to go down a random amount. So I'm going to need a random generator. The class critter is what we're going to use to actually define what a critter is. Now I've got my constructor, which is right here. And you'll see, no, I can't. It's not going to my left. Oh, hang on. I need to readjust. There we go. There we are. All right. Now we got it. Okay, so I've got def underscore underscore init self name. Now I'm just going to give it a name. When I create it, I'll assign the name. I'll assign a value called hunger and set that to 100. And then I'll print a little message saying that it was born so I can see it. We're not going to visually see anything in this project, but I mean, you could add graphics and stuff if you wanted. Now, our first function is feed. And since we're in an object, every little function has to have kind of this self modifier item here, which we're never really going to use. But technically it's used, I guess, but we aren't explicitly going to use it. So I give a little menu. What do you want to feed your critter? Critter biscuit, Slim Jim, filet mignon. Choose one. If I choose 1, 2, 3, and I did not convert any of this to integers because I don't need to. I can just use the 1, 2, 3 here, and I won't worry about any weird crashes or anything. I just went ahead and set some arbitrary numbers here. If I feed it a critter biscuit, it gains 10. If I feed it, a Slim Jim, it gains 20. And if I feed it a nice juicy steak, it gains 50. And if I type in something else, it's going to look at me sadly for not feeding it. Pretty simple. Now, at the end of that, this is still inside this function, if you notice how everything's kind of tabbed over here. I said before I wanted 100 to be the max, so I need to double check and make sure, like if I fed it 20 steaks, it's not like 500 or something. So I check if it goes over, I just set it to 100. Pretty simple, straightforward. I talk. If I run talk, it's going to just check how hungry it is and just say a little message. This is less of a talk and more of a, I guess, check, but if you want to rename it, go right ahead. Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to say I talk to it and it tells me it's starving or whatever. So based on how hungry it is, less than 30, starving. Less than 60, pretty hungry. That would be like 59 and lower. Less than 90, 89 to 60 basically. It could eat something. And anything higher than 90 would be, I'm full. And then of course we have our hangry function. I just picked a random number between 1 and 20. Again, pretty arbitrary. I just say, they lose that much every time this function runs, and I actually go about subtracting it. The minus equals takes away. If this was 5, it'll take 5 away out of hunger and display that on the screen. Now, that leaves us the main. Now, since we did most of our menus and stuff inside this object, I don't have to do a lot in the main. I start with, def main, and of course I put a little comment to show that's the end, and then I will call it at the end. Inside here, I set a name equal to whatever I want to name it. When I type that in, it'll actually create the critter, and then we get into the loop where it asks me to interact with it. End is set to false. While end equals false, keep going. If end equals true, this would stop. I could also say while end does not equal true, and that would still work. I could say also just while true, and this thing would be an infinite loop, and I could just break out of it later. There's several ways to approach this. I have my menu, talk, feed. Squish is what we're going to use to end the program. If I choose 1, that's talk. I just say critter.talk. And then I'll run the hangry because, talking is very exhausting for some critters, I guess. If I choose 2, I'm going to feed it, so I'm going to give it some food. And I opted not to run the hangry there. If I choose 3, well, that means you're going to quit. So you squish your poor critter. And then the end is set to true. I could also, as opposed to just doing end, I could just say break. And that would break out of the loop the same way. And if I choose something other than 1, 2, 3, it says it's not an option, and the loop will keep going until it's done. So let's take a look at what this looks like running. Of course, it's going to be kind of off my screen. Let me see if I can pull it back over here. There we go. All right, so name your critter. I will call him Pickles. Pickles is born. Choose your option. Well, if I talk to Pickles, he should be stuffed because he starts off at 100 hunger. And he lost almost as much as you could lose. Ouch. Sorry, poor Pickles. I didn't know it was that exhausting talking to me. I'll talk again. Little peckish. He loses 19 again. Ooh. Okay, 1. This time I lost 8. Okay, I was getting a little worried there. We'll do it again. Now they're very hungry. And of course, I can feed, you know, Slim Jims, for example, or I can feed and type in something nonsensical, and it will tell me that, you know, the creature looks at me weirdly. One, they're a little peckish. Of course, I can also choose 3, which ends the program. And then the program's over. So I made a critter, gave it all the little statistics and interactions. Feed, talk, we could throw in a play, we could throw in a couple other things. Train, add like several other statistics on this thing if we wanted to. But this is the simplest version I can kind of throw together. I'll walk through the code one more time here, or at least zoom through the code, I guess. This is the start. Feed, talk, hangry. That's the entirety of the critter. And then the main, where I actually like make it so I can interact with the critter. Now I could like take all those menus and put them down here if I wanted to. But I mean, it's part of the critter, it's part of what the critter can do. It makes more sense to, you know, put it here. And if I had multiple critters or something I was dealing with, you know, this is going to be less work later on to encompass everything inside the creature that, you know, is going to be doing whatever it's going to be doing. If I put it inside like this area here, well, this area is going to get bigger. If I add more things, this area gets even bigger. Especially if I have different kinds of creatures or something. With this, if I need to edit something, I just edit the creature and it works for all the creatures. So there is your example of a critter.